Welcome to Heart Home Community's most recent Baldwinsville Community Update. I'm your host, Shelley Hoffman. Hey everybody, it's Shelley Hoffman, and I am here with our monthly check-in with Chief Mike Lefancheck from the Village Police Department. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you, Shelley? Did you have a good weekend?
I did. I had a really nice weekend. Well, I had an okay weekend. If you drive past my house and look at my driveway, there might be a lot of kitty litter on it right now. So we can talk about that at another point in time. But I figured there's been enough people looking up at my driveway over the last couple days that I would acknowledge the fact that I may or may not spill a can of paint in my driveway and tried to soak it up with kitty litter. So we'll see how that continues to go on. So
I'll take a trip past there a little later today and see how that's going. See how that's working.
Yeah, it's been interesting. So let's just leave it at that, Chief. How about you? Did you have a nice weekend?
I did, very much so. Yeah, I actually played golf with some friends on Friday. If you remember how windy and cold it was, but we still had a good time and a lot of laughs. And my hands are, I think, thawed out by now, so that's good. So very nice time. So it was all good.
Perfect. Nice. I had a friend that went up north and they had 4 inches of snow or something ridiculous. So at least we didn't have the snow,
Right. Can't talk about that.
So what's been going on in the village since we last spoke?
Well, I think right after we last spoke, we had something occur that was somewhat unusual for us, where we had a person on the bridge, and I mean on the bridge, like the metal structure itself that spans the Seneca River there on Route 48. One of my sergeants called me a little after midnight to tell me that they'd had a person that was on top of the bridge, and one of our officers was conversing with this individual, and he'd been drinking some, and if you go over and look at the bridge, those beams are maybe a little bit wider than what you think they are, but I can assure you it's nothing I would climb up.
Was it the railing? I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry. Was it like the railing he was walking or standing on, or I guess?
No, like look at the bridge itself. So that metal structure, and he was on the top of the bridge.
Oh, wow.
So up on the top, like 30 feet up in the air, whatever it might be up there. So He had climbed up there. Our officer was talking to him, and then at different points in time, he was laying down. Then he was running around up there. This person was a roofer, is their trade, so kind of used to working up high, and eventually he kind of scampered down the south side of that. And then there were a couple troopers down there that were assisting us, and he kind of slid down and jumped down and then ran behind the former Red Mill Inn, and then ran out onto Paper Mill Island and got to the far end of the island and literally just leapt over the railing into the water.
Oh my gosh.
And so at that point, obviously, we had assistance from the sheriff's office, who were also on scene, and Air One, and then the Baldwinsville Fire Department with their boat. And after about 20 minutes or so, they found this individual up along the wall there, and they brought him over to Mercer Park, and the ambulance corps took him to the hospital, along with one of our officers that was initially talking to him. She rode in the ambulance, and then by that point, I had come into work, and Sergeant and I went over to Mike Hotel, where we thought he might be staying, because this individual had no identification on him. And I give my sergeant a lot of credit. He did a nice job, because he's a little bit younger than certainly I am, and a little bit more familiar with social media. So we found the room we thought he was in. Unfortunately, the room was registered to actually the person that was employing him. So when he looked up the name on social media, he goes, "This isn't the guy." But then he searched that person's social media until he found a picture and said, "No, I think this is the guy." And he had just seen him for a short period of time. But long story short, we were able to piece together who it was, and turned out that this individual had some warrants for him. So with the sheriff's office assistance, and they took custody of him down at the hospital. Everything ended well, and no one got hurt, which was good. But obviously, and I was in till about 3 that morning, 3:30, and wrote a couple press releases and sent out a Facebook post because the media had already reached out to me during the middle of the night to ask about it. So it was great to be able to put out a social media post. So if anyone had any questions, they would know exactly what it was, and then the media could get whatever information they needed off of there also. And then I did respond and send out some press releases to some media entities that had reached out. So not something that we traditionally deal with. And the sergeant said, when he got to the scene, kind of there, the officer was on the street, kind of in front of Sammy Malone's, and he goes, at first I'm like, who's she's talking? He said, I go, who's the officer talking to? Because he goes, the officer was talking, but I didn't know who she was even talking to. And then I had to look up and realize somebody was up on the bridge. He goes, because I thought they meant like on the bridge, like on the road, or on the sidewalk, but no, they meant like up in the air on the bridge.
Yeah, I'd obviously heard about it. I mentioned before we went live, people had asked me about it,
Yeah.
To see if you would talk about it. And I assumed he was kind of walking the rail of the sidewalk. I didn't realize he was up on the bridge,
Right.
which even that I thought was extremely, dangerous, because obviously the water on the other side. So I was talking to a couple business owners in the course of that weekend, and there was some, I don't know, just a couple different things, probably not things that you necessarily were called on, but I'm like, is there a full moon? What is going on in our little village? There was, another incident at a restaurant, they kind of took care of it, whatever. But, but then you combine that. It reminds me of 2 months ago when we talked, when there was the Fulton Bank and, out towards Cold Springs Road. Just, there's more things I think that happen in our village sometimes, but as always, by the time we're talking about, you guys have a pretty good control, or, everything's been put, I don't know how to put it, Chief, but, all lined up. What needs to happen has happened. So it's nice to hear that.
Those things have been handled and dealt with, but I think it's good still for the community to hear some of the things we're dealing with and some of the things we're seeing, and that might go on while people are sleeping or while people are at work, that they just don't realize are happening in the village, and that our officers are dealing with. We don't deal with that on a daily basis, but we do deal with other incidents that are unusual. I mean, we had the shooting out on Cold Springs Road that you referred to. Obviously, a bank robbery that we assisted with, and back when we spoke several months ago, I know Manly just had a similar situation with what appears to be a murder-suicide, and unfortunately, we had one of those in our community a few months ago as well. So, there's a lot that does go on over the course of a month. And when you sent me the message yesterday, we good for tomorrow, or that was Saturday, I can't remember which day it was. One day blends into the next, but as I start to think, okay, what are some things I want to talk about? Because for us, I don't want to say things become routine, but these are things that we respond to calls and we deal with things out of the ordinary all the time. That's what we do. But for the people in the community, I think it's still good to hear and what goes on, and I think it's good for our goal to be transparent in what we deal with and what we do.
Well, to that effect, I mean, not everything that you deal with happens right here in Baldwinsville. You have to react to things that happen all over the country. And how would you deal with it here in Baldwinsville? Sure. Yep. And I know right before we were talking about Brooklyn Center, and obviously that's a horrible thing that happened, and that's something that you talk about in your department, correct? And
well, yes, and to what you're referring to, obviously, is what occurred in Brooklyn Center, where an officer, a female officer with over 20 years on the job, she shot and killed a man out there. And according to the police chief, the previous chief, he indicated that he felt it was a case where she mistook her firearm for her taser. And I'm not going to comment on the particulars of the case, because obviously it's a pending matter, and there's a lot going on, and there's other people that have commented on that, and that's really not my role today. But immediately when that occurred, I met with our second in command, Mike Lockwood. Mike has been on the job for over 20 years, been a firearms instructor for a long time. And he and I immediately after that talked. We knew we had firearms training coming up. We do firearms training 3 times a year, including a night firearms. So we do a lot of firearms training for our officers for familiarity and proficiency. And we do taser training as well. We have 2 certified training taser instructors here. And I spoke with Lieutenant Lockwood, and he and I agreed that we do taser training on an annual basis. But we said, you know what, in light of this, let's be a little bit proactive here. So we tasked our taser instructors to come up with a refresher type of training and incorporate some scenarios into that. So each of our officers is going through a 3 to 4 hour training block with an instructor, which incorporates some scenarios, some transitioning from firearm to taser, taser to firearm usage. If anyone has seen our officers out on patrol, they do carry tasers. We've been carrying them pretty much throughout my entire 10 years, Chief, which is just about 13 years now, come up on 13 years later this month. And they carry it on their offhand side. So if anyone's right-handed, it goes on their left side. If they're left-handed, obviously, conversely, it goes on their right side. Taser is yellow in color. Our firearms are black. But we felt that was an important thing for us to do for a number of reasons. Number one, obviously, in a high-stress situation, which this incident was out there, we want to do everything we can to provide our officers with good training, foundational training, and training that is going to be repeatable under high stress. So we felt that, number one, that would be the best thing to do for our officers. But then number two, we also felt that it was the best thing to do for the community. Because with a situation like this, and it's such high profile and brings so much media attention and so much attention from the community, whether it be the village of Baldwinsville or an urban area like city of Philadelphia or city of New York or city of Syracuse or any other area, we felt it was important for us to respond to that and take some proactive steps. And I guess that's one of the benefits, I suppose, of being an agency our size, where we can contact our training instructors and say, hey, let's get this put together and let's get this done with everyone to get through this, by the middle to end of May. And that way we can, where if you've got an agency of 300 or 400, that's going to be much more difficult to do. There's budgetary constraints, there's scheduling issues, where in a smaller agency, we're a little bit more able to adapt to that. And that's not always the case. Sometimes larger agencies are better at things. This just happens to be something that, because of our size, I think we're able to easily adapt. And then to get everyone through that training, I just think it's smart to do that. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and let the public know that that's what we're doing.
No, and I think the public appreciates the fact that at least when we talk, not just your department, but a lot of other departments of the village try to be proactive. I mean, you see something that's happening and you don't just talk about it, you react to it and adapt to it, which is great. Especially since rumor has it, you might be on unemployment. Did I hear something about, Chief, that you're on unemployment?
Well, to just show that anyone can be a victim of identity theft. Yes, I was my personal information, my social security number. But what was interesting, they utilized an address that I have not lived at in 20 years.
Wow.
To file and to let the public know I had unemployment fraud, unemployment benefits applied for in my name, utilizing my social security number. We've had several village employees that's happened to, and I know many other people in the community and across the country have had similar things with data breaches that have occurred in recent times and personal information being out there. So I've had to go through that process, literally sitting right on my desk, because this just came up late last week. I've got the extended fraud alert request to send in, got my utility bill, copy of my social security card. It becomes a real pain in to deal with this. And I pulled my credit report to make sure that no one had applied for any credit or anything in my name, which fortunately had not occurred. So I'm getting this squared away. But, anyone can be victimized by this type of thing. It's something that we get calls on very frequently from people, and we do document that and take a report on it. But there, unfortunately, from a law enforcement perspective, local law enforcement, this is usually not something that we're going to be able to investigate or solve because of the complexity and the level of sophistication involved in these types of scams, that these are worldwide groups involved in this type of thing, that I know the FBI and Department of Justice are, actively working to try and deal with, and it's a constant battle. So yeah, the village clerk got a hold of me and said, "Geez, I got some bad news. Your information was used to collect unemployment." And I said, "Well, can I just stay home?" And they're like, "No."
No.
Mayor said, "No, you got to come to work." So so I'm obviously came to work. So
Oh, and the reason obviously I wanted to bring it up is one, just to pick on you a little bit, Chief, because it's fun. It makes me laugh. We've talked about before. But the other thing, it literally can happen to anybody. Like going back to locking the doors, your car doors and all the things that you say over and over again. Some things you have control over, and some things, just happen to you no matter how well you think you've protected yourself. But it literally can happen to anybody. It happened to a good friend of mine. I'm assuming it was the same thing. Her company got a letter stating about the unemployment, because that's what concerns me is how am I even going to know that these things are happening? Kind
yeah,
of until it's
so
too
what
late.
happened, the state unemployment sent it to the village, and then the village clerk notified me, and obviously the village clerk immediately notified the state that no, I did not file for unemployment benefits, and that my personal information was correct, but my address was wrong. So it did go to an old address that, like I said, I haven't lived at for 20 years. So to your point, just be vigilant with that type of thing. Check I think you get 5 or 6 free credit reports a year or something.
Mhm.
It's probably a good idea every 3-4 months to pull that and check them, just to make sure that nothing untoward is on your credit, and that you're not being victimized by anything.
Yeah, and that's a good reminder. Sometimes I get depressed when I look at my credit report. I'm not going to lie, but it's something that I need to to do. So the other thing I think you had mentioned you want to talk about, which I'm always curious, is what our resource officers are up to in the schools.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was talking with one of them today, who also happens to be our taser instructor, and I said, on my way to work this morning, I was thinking, it'd probably be a good idea to kind of update the community on what our school resource officers have been doing and are doing, especially in light of COVID, and how they're being utilized, because some of the roles and responsibilities have changed, and I think it's a betterment for the district, and it's helping kids out as well. So as I was talking with her, in the past, obviously she's got lunch groups, and she said, I still have lunch groups now where she'll interact and have lunch with kids, but the kids are eating lunch in their rooms and not in the lunchroom, and obviously there's no gym class for her to go into, and so just now they're starting with limited groups in the gyms. So that's been a little bit different, but obviously interacting with the kids while they're changing classes is very important to have that presence. She indicated that some of the teachers are realizing that with no gym class, and the kids have a lot of energy, and it's difficult for them to sit still during that time period. And she goes, I'll take kids and we'll go for walks. So she'll have an opportunity to talk to the kids and just get them out of the room. So before they become a behavioral issue in the room through no fault of their own, only because they're a typical early teen kid going through puberty that is kind of bouncing off the walls, she'll get them out of that classroom and walk them for 5 or 10 minutes and just get some of that energy out and deal with them. And then we've still got kids in these cohorts that have been learning from home and have not been coming to school, either through, some parents and families have decided their kids are going to do remote learning, and obviously that's their choice. But we have some students that maybe don't log on and haven't been completing their work. So our resource officers will actually go do home visits, and we'll go to the homes of the kids, and we'll ascertain what's going on in the home. Do they have a Wi-Fi hotspot that they can access internet in? And do they need that set up? What's preventing them from getting online? Is it a home situation? Do they just need some encouragement? Those types of things that we can hopefully help our student body to stay focused and get their work done and stay connected to the district, even if they're doing remote learning on a full-time basis. So our students, our SROs are doing that as well. And then with the increase number of parents that don't want their kids to ride the school bus, we have a correlating increase in traffic on the school grounds. So our SROs are assisting in traffic, especially over at Ray Middle School, Van Buren Road. I was over there a couple weeks ago, and traffic is backed up. So we've got one of our officers assists the deputy who's over there assisting in traffic, and then the same thing at Durkee and Baker, assisting trying to get the parents in and out so the buses can flow, and then trying to just maintain campus safety, because with all those kids walking around, then we've got the added cars on campus. We want to make sure that no one gets hit and that pedestrians who are walking are safe. So our role has expanded in that regard as well. So I think they're really being utilized truly as a resource. Number one, to help prevent any issues. Kids who maybe are a little bit anxious or have some energy, get them out. Still doing some of the interactions at lunchtime when they can, going into the classrooms, talking to them. And then with the home visits, helping those kids who are remote learning stay connected to the district and feel like the district is concerned about them. And those kids that maybe are struggling a little bit academically to log on and stay focused, assisting in that endeavor. And then she did tell me that, they are seeing an increase in some, persons in crisis or what we refer to as mental health calls, and those types of things. So assisting kids that are dealing with anxiety and things from COVID. There's been a lot written and reported about kids and the struggles that they've been facing throughout this COVID process. And you're certainly a mom of kids in school, and I don't envy you or any of the other parents at all. My youngest is 22, and obviously my kids are out of school now, but it's been a struggle for them. So I think our SROs are really being utilized well, and look forward to that program continuing, because that's probably the most visible and our most important community policing program that we do here in Baldwinsville.
That's nice to hear too. I didn't think about the home visits, but those students are technically, obviously still part of the district, still part of that program. And it's probably nice to just have another individual that's checking in on them, making sure everything's going well, and shows that they care, right?
Right, and especially if there's an issue with Wi-Fi, do they not have the accessibility, or is it laziness? What let's identify what barriers are there for these kids to be engaged and be involved in the learning process, and then how can we resolve those barriers that might exist and get the youth back engaged in the learning process, so that way when hopefully everyone returns to school at some point in time, whatever that might be, they'll be on point and on track, so that way they can move forward in their academic career as successfully as possible.
No, I think that's an absolute great program. Another thing that I was going to ask you about, and we didn't talk about this before, so hopefully I'm not putting you on the spot. But we had done Angry Garlic. Jeff Rogers obviously helped organize with the chamber, the chowder event, which was so nice. Oh my goodness, to see all the people, they had their masks on. I saw the police out on the bikes. I'm sure you were out there or organizing it or whatever, but I don't know who the officers were. I just remember smiling because it was like a sense of summer normalcy to see, got people out on the streets having a good time. You guys out there just policing, making sure everything was going to go smoothly and safely. I know that Lauren Rossett, who's the new director of the chamber, has spoke to you about they want to do a village-wide garage sale, and she talked to you about making sure we do that safely. And she said that you were very open to the idea. Again, make sure that they mention the masks and all the COVID precautions that need to happen when we're out in public and stuff. But do you see that kind of being a trend a little bit, Chief, of maybe some more things? Like we have Margarita Fest, we have Seneca River Days, like obviously tweaking and changing, but from a police standpoint, did it go so well with the chowder that maybe things like this can slowly progress over the summer? Or did you guys have a problem that maybe wasn't mentioned out there on social media or anything?
No, we didn't have any problems at all. And actually, I hadn't written Charter Fest down, but it was on my mind to talk about, so I'm glad you brought it up. No, we had actually our two school resource officers. They both signed up for the overtime, Officer Natoli and Officer Quattrini, and they're both certified bike officers. So just so people know, we don't just put officers on bikes. You actually have to go to a bike school. It's a week-long school. It's very tough. They do a lot of riding. And so many of our officers have gone through that. But we put out the opportunity to work that, and that worked out great. And I did come through town a couple times during it, and was, very glad to see the number of people and saw people wearing masks, and I thought that was just an excellent thing. And no, Lauren did get a hold of me, talked about the village-wide garage sale and concept, and I thought that was another great idea and great thought process. Last summer, I went up to Lake Placid, and obviously that's a small village like ours, and people walking up and down the street, and there's like set up a little bit differently with one main drag, so to speak, one main street. And even on the street there, everyone was wearing masks, and because it was so congested. But those are the types of things that if we can do those would be great. And it was nice to have we wanted our officers out there, number one, just to make sure everything went well. Number two, hopefully to, again, be visible and provide that sense of hopefully security that people might feel that, hey, everything's good. And then if they're, someone has a question or someone's from out of the area, and I talked to Jeff after the fact about how many people they had and how many people were there. And from their end, they just thought it was a great success. And I did as well. And I've talked to obviously Mike Shepard and Megan O'Donnell, who are obviously on the village board, but they're very involved in the volunteer center and kind of run the Margarita Fest as well. And, there's a couple maybe modifications needed for that. But with COVID restrictions, the legislature just one of the main restrictions for that was going to be the fact that you had to order food when you got alcohol.
Oh, yeah.
But that's just been lifted by the legislature. So they changed that. So because previously they said, I talked to Trustee Shepard about that, and I said, the Margarita Fest I think is going to be fine. The question becomes, like, do you have to order food when you're going to get your sample? And he goes, oh, that's a good point. So we're still going to have to work around some things with the liquor authority because you can't stand and be served. You have to be seated still. So there's still some issues associated with that some hurdles they're going to have to iron out as to how they're going to do that. Most establishments can't serve outside, unlike Angry Garlic, that is that seating area. They can only serve there and while you're eating. So there's still some things there that need to be dealt with, but I don't think they're insurmountable, hopefully. So, but to your point, the village-wide garage sale, the Seneca River Days, hopefully some of these things, depending upon how the organizers plan them out and what the guidelines are from the state, we can start to do some of those things. The mass gathering things, the huge events, I'm not sure those are going to occur right now. We'll have to see how that all shakes out. But some of the things I think we will be able to do, which will be nice.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. It was refreshing, even though we got another snowstorm after the whole chowder thing. So the highs and lows of Central New York,
Yeah.
But, okay. Well, is there anything else, Chief, before we part ways for this month that we didn't cover that you had mentioned or thought about?
Nope, that's about it. Other than just please lock your car doors. I'm going to say that every time we talk. If you could lock your car doors, you'd help prevent crime and be doing us a real benefit. So if you could do that, other than that, as always, look forward to chatting with you and having the opportunity to speak to the community.
Well, thank you, Chief. And you enjoy the rest of this Monday, and maybe I'll see you around the village at some point.
Sounds good.
Bye.